Welcome to the Leadership Unscripted podcast presented by Hiring Strategies. The Leadership Unscripted podcast is your go-to source for all things people management oriented. In each episode, we discuss industry trends, problems, and more importantly, offer solutions. We are so happy you could join us.
All right, welcome to Leadership Unscripted. I'm Kim Leifson with Hiring Strategies, and I have my what I call my dream team here today. I'm going to introduce you really quickly. First of all, I have Kelley Ashby with Kelley Ashby Consulting, and Kelley is the guru for all things emotional intelligence. If you want to understand what emotional intelligence is, need training on emotional intelligence, want to talk about emotional intelligence in your organization, Kelley is the person that you need to call. And I also consider her a dear friend. All of these people are my friends. But TJ Kastning is the owner of Ambassador Group. He is, I love the work that TJ is doing in disrupting the recruiting industry. He's really doing it different. He focuses on the construction industry, but I'm working on him to branch out into other industries as well. Hopefully someday he'll do that. But he is making it happen in the world of recruiting. And then we have Matt Bucholz, who Matt is the owner of Matt Bucholz Consulting. And Matt focuses on consulting in the construction industry around residential project design and building. So thank you all for being here today. We wanted to talk about happiness at work. And what is happiness at work? What do we all consider to be happiness at work? Should we be happy at work? Or is work just work? So I thought I'd start with just the general question about what is happiness at work and why do we think it's important or not? Kelley, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll take a stab at that. So to me, happiness at work involves, feeling empowered and feeling like I'm contributing to some purpose, and that my work is helping fulfill, the bigger mission and purpose of the organization or the work that I have my hands on. And when I have that sense that I'm contributing, I'm fulfilling a purpose, I'm empowered to make a meaningful contribution, those are the kinds of things that at least make me feel happy at work.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, TJ, one of you want to jump in? What do you think happiness at work means?
I think for me, I start with what is happiness and where does happiness come from? And then I have to apply it to work. And sometimes I guess I get a little confused by contentedness versus happiness. And in the context of work specifically, I think it can mean a lot of different things for different people. And it's meant different things for me at different periods of my life. And so I really like everything that Kelley said because I think it got me closer to a definition perhaps than I've been before. But I think that it's truly hard to pin down because of how different it is for not only each of us, but for the individual over their lifetime at work.
Yeah. It means different, I think it means different things to different people, right? Mm-hmm. TJ, what are your thoughts? What does happiness at work mean to you?
I can't help but think about the word fulfillment when it comes to work because, like Matt pointed out, it's a little bit of an ambiguous term, right? How we all define happiness, and it's a little bit fleeting too, right? Like some days I've started very happy, and by the end of the day, I'm just fighting to have some level of joy in the struggle of the day when things are going wrong, and that's kind of a normal thing in work, right? Personally, I believe that work is about serving other people, whether you're making a widget or a product or service, or at the end of the day, it really comes down to making other people's lives better. And so how well can I connect the struggle that I'm going through with the service and the improvement that I'm providing to, my employees, our clients, our candidates. And there's a lot of topsy-turvy elements to that, in the day-to-day. And so maybe if I use the word happiness, I would have to use like deep happiness, right? Not necessarily superficial happiness, because it's got to account for inherent frustration and the problems that come with just navigating, working with challenging circumstances, challenging people, all those associated elements.
Yeah. I think there's a big part of happiness, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. I am definitely an introvert. But I think there's a part about happiness that involves connection, right? And connection, even for introverts, I think connection can be on multiple levels. It's a connection to people, but maybe even through work, right? Like I'm having an impact on somebody, and so that's my connection to them. So I think working with people is important, but even more so, it's important that the impact, that something that I'm doing is affecting somebody else or having an impact, hopefully a positive impact on somebody else. I think that's really important to happiness in the workplace. But I also want to talk about, I appreciate that I think all of your definitions are absolutely true and correct, right? Because again, I think happiness at work is different for different people. I know people who hate their job, but go to work every day they're happy to go to work every day because their job pays for their fun on the weekend, right? It's sustaining their hobbies. And so they're fine going to work, but they just hate what they do. Like they don't want to be there every day, but they know that their means to the end is they get to do and have fun and be happy later. So I think work, it can be different things for different people. I also think it's important that whatever it is we're doing on a daily basis, to think about that connection to how what we're doing impacts the people around us when we go home. And how how our work spills over into our families and into our communities. Do you have any comments on that?
I do. The idea of having the work that we do be received by others in a positive and productive way. And then you've expanded it to say our families and our communities as well. I think that it has me focus on the origin of all of that. And the origin is the offering of the individual, the worker, that is offering their effort, their labor, whatever it is. And perhaps the greatest happiness in giving is when you're giving something that is authentically you. So, I think what's coming clear for me as we're talking is that a really large component of generating that positive expression of your work out there is having a strong sense of self and a sense of purpose and a sense of why you're doing what you're doing. And I think for me, that is perhaps more relevant in the scenario of people who, are on the other path from the ones you described, who hate their jobs, but are happy with the balance of what their income does for their opportunities when they're not working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kelley, TJ, any comments on that, on what Matt thinks?
I might be alone in this, but I see it being really sad. The idea that somebody would live their life hating work so that they can make money to go do things outside of work. You know, personally, to me, in an ambassador group, like, we spend most of our life working, right? Like, just think about all the time, every day, every week that we work. And if it's really just to secure things to do on the weekend, it's like, is that really worth it? Like, we've got one life to live. And you're right, Kim, that's out there. But man, I think we can aim so much higher.
I totally agree. I would hope that people would. I just know people that do that. And I often think, gosh, how does it feel when you go home to your kids? How does it feel when you're, when you walk in the door and your significant other, you respond to your significant other with all that pent up frustration that you've had from the day, right? I totally agree with you, TJ. I just know people that do it.
Well, to a degree, some of us perhaps our opportunities in work are such that we don't see this elevated expression of ourselves at work. I started working when I was 12 years old, which was when I was legally allowed to in Wisconsin. And I had paper routes. Now, I didn't take extreme pride in delivering the paper any better than anybody else did, or in having generated, relationships with my customers that were, really strong and important. So to a degree, when I started working, it was, I want to buy that Schwinn bicycle. I want to buy that, set of stereo speakers. And so it was, work is a path to acquisition. And in all honesty, it wasn't until squarely in adult life that I started to even become aware of the concept that work wasn't something that you were lucky to find. Work was something that you could create opportunity in and pursue interest, curiosity, and for some of the luckiest among us, or perhaps most skilled among us, also passion.
I think a couple things have crossed my mind listening to you all discuss the seeping into our personal lives that work can have, that influence. And the first thing that comes to my mind is the compartmentalism. We are human beings. We can't compartmentalize what's happening in our personal lives and, stop that from feeding and filtering into how we're showing up at work. Same in reverse. If something great or something super frustrating happens at work, we can't leave it at the door, so to speak, because those emotions will follow us and won't just be checked at the door. Either way, going to or from work. The other thing that crossed my mind was this concept of living to work or working to live, which is, I think, what you were talking about, Kim. And I think part of happiness at work is finding, that fulfillment in what we're doing at work. And so if we haven't yet found that and we are, just working to live, then maybe we just haven't found the right thing for us yet.
Mm-hmm. I think there's maybe hierarchies. I think of it as hierarchies of work, right? Like when you come out of, like you were describing that, when we're young and we just need to make a little money, we need a job, right? Like sometimes we just have to get a job to pay the bills. And so we get that job to pay the bills, but then we sometimes, I think people get stuck in that paying the bills mode and don't think about, well, what is it that I really want to do? What's going to bring me joy? What's going to make me happy at work? I don't necessarily think we talk about that. We just focus on the paying the bills part.
I think you're right. I think we do focus a lot on the paying the bills part, and that work is the way that we generate the money that we need to pay the bills. And I don't know that we can separate that necessarily, but what I've found at this stage in my life is that I am much more rigorous with regard to assessing the fit of opportunities as they come up than I've ever been before. And the reason for that rigor is because I recognize at this point in my life that two opportunities aren't necessarily going to bring me closest to the self-expression that will have me feel like my most whole self. And in feeling like my most whole self, I believe that I'll be capable of producing the best work. And in producing the best work, I get reflected back to me, a positive reflection of my truest whole self.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Kelley, I'm interested from the emotional intelligence perspective. Like what I just said about having the product of your work reflect back an image of your whole self. How does that land with you from an EI perspective?
Well, one thing that comes to my mind is the self-awareness. Who am I? What brings me joy? What makes me feel fulfilled? What can I do to create meaning or contribute meaning in my work or my interactions with other people? And so research shows when we do nice things for other people, we gain from that too. And so I think that it's connected somewhat to that when I'm, living my best life or working my best work self. What do I gain? How does that fill my bucket? That's what comes to my mind when I reflect on what you said.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
TJ, I'm also interested, do you, when you're assessing candidates for, placement with prospective clients, do you seek to determine if that individual is a happy individual? Is happiness a part of your, assessment criteria?
No. I mean, it's too floppy of a word. We do look for like what gets this person fired up. Like, what do they want? What do they want out of their life? How do they want to serve people? And if you go back, like think of motivations in layers, you peel back the layers. Why is that important? Why is that important? Why you just keep asking these, what drives them? Then you can get at this idea of where they want to fit in the economy and how they want to serve people. And then that will be a heuristic towards a form of happiness. But I think getting this word happiness is I'm a little uncomfortable with it just because yesterday I was unhappy. I was unhappy at work. And I would hesitate to encourage people to index off of this sort of lightweight come and go feeling. And what I'm looking for is, so money is the shadow of value. And that's what I always tell my team. So if we want to go out and provide value, how do we do that? What's our mandate? What's our opportunity to go out and serve these people? Like, Matt, I like your personal ethos, elevate through service, right? And we can each apply that in our own domain, whether we're building homes or coaching each other or whatever, right? We're always trying to elevate the customer, client, etc. And I notice, like, if you look at recruiting in particular, not a single recruiter I've ever met intended to become a recruiter, including myself. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. So by some definition, I should be unhappy that I'm a recruiter, right? But what I've found is that where I get my jollies in recruiting is a sense that I made a difference for a person, that I served them, and that has really shaped my perspective of when people say like, oh, I want to do this thing because I think this thing will make me happy. If they do that thing, and they could want to do that thing as a child or from childhood, if they don't find good traction with serving people in that thing, they won't be fulfilled in it. And likewise, when people like myself fall into recruiting, unplanned, unexpected, but they find a way, wow, I can have meaning here, I can provide value, then I can pursue a deeper, meaningful fulfillment that it brings me through the highs and lows of happiness. And I'm not saying that happiness isn't an important thing. I think there's things leaders can do and we can each individually do to cultivate our happiness, but it has to be built on a deeper foundation of meaning and service to others first.
I think what you're talking about, oh, sorry, keep going, TJ.
Well, maybe if I can just connect what you said earlier, Kim, about the person who needs to make a certain living to experience a certain life, right? That's a necessity for all of us, and not a bad one. But if that person can experience a deep level of interpersonal fulfillment, doing meaningful work with meaningful relationships, and do that at a economic exchange that supports their life outside of that work to do other things that are important to them, right? How much the better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think there's what you're talking about, TJ, is that connection, right? It's that impact. It's that I want to do something that's going to have some sort of positive impact on someone else or something, right? And I've talked to both sides of the coin. I've talked to people who are like, who that person who wanted to be a pilot from the age of 7, and they are now a pilot and they are loving what they do every day and they're fulfilled by that work and it's all great, right? And then I've also talked to people who have these amazing hobbies where, they're woodworkers. My grandfather was an amazing woodworker. Half the furniture in my house was made by my grandfather. Not half, less than half, but a lot of it was made by my grandfather. And it's high quality craftsmanship, right? And it's beautiful stuff. And I asked him one day, he owned a hardware store. It was a family generational hardware store that got passed down, and he did that for work, but he would come home and work on the weekends and the evenings in his shop and make beautiful pieces of furniture. And I asked him one day and I said, Grandpa, why don't you do that? Why don't you just sell the furniture? Like, do that. And he said that if I did that every day, it would be work and it wouldn't be fun. So I'm curious what you all think about that, because TJ, I think you're kind of on that topic, and I want to, we're skirting this with the I go to work every day and I don't like what I do, but I think consciously making the choice to not do something you love because you don't want it to be work is a different perspective on that.
Matt or Kelley should go first. I want to weigh in for sure, but I don't want to. I don't want to take up too much airtime.
Kelley, what do you think?
Oh goodness. I do think that having the, I don't know, what do you want to call it? The responsibility or the burden of choosing to do a certain task for your sole income does change the tenor or the meaning around it for some reason. such as, changing from running the hardware store to making furniture as, the sole income.
Mm-hmm.
It adds a layer of responsibility and duty to what may be a hobby instead. And, I think about people who love to bake, and they'll bake for family and friends, and somebody will say, oh, you should, open your own business and do that. Well, then that changes it. It changes it into a sense of responsibility. In fact, my sister was just talking about this weekend, thinking about retirement and wanting to do something in retirement to bring in income. But the fact that, but then I'm tied down to doing that and I won't be able to travel as much. And I'm like, but if it's a at-home thing, you can choose the hours that you want to do it. So you can build those boundaries around that, responsibility. But I know I'm getting long-winded on my answer here. I do think turning a hobby into a way of living changes how we interact with that activity, or how we respond to that activity.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, I'm going to toss it to you, and then we'll let TJ respond.
So parallel to what I was thinking about it, right? And it's, the craft and hobby that we've developed is absolutely of us. And when we take us to the marketplace, which, 3 of us on this call are consultants. And what that means is we are very directly taking us to the marketplace, right? There's this component of having the marketplace reflect back to you what it wants from you and what it doesn't want from you. So Kim, with your grandfather, if your grandfather were to produce furniture for the marketplace, would people be willing to compensate him for the number of hours of joy that he put into producing that furniture? Or would he say, I can't put 200 hours into this chair. It's only marketable to put 120 hours into the chair. So which 60 hours of my joy do I sacrifice to be market ready?
Right. Yeah. It changes how you think about that work and what it is you're doing. I mean, TJ, we've been talking a little bit about this on the recruiting side too, right? Like a full service client versus a kind of a client light, right? And how we will serve them differently. Well, do they deserve less? No, but we have to be profitable and we have to think about how that works. So yeah, absolutely.
Are you guys familiar with the book E-Myth or Entrepreneurial Myth?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't read it, no.
I haven't read it, but I know the premise and I've seen excerpts.
Yeah, I would prescribe this to any business owner, especially one who wants to like live out their passion or their hobby in their work. And what he articulates there, if I summarize the TLDR, is like a lot of people are passionate about woodworking, and so they think, woodworking business, and they think, I'm going to be able to do woodworking commercially. And what it actually means is you're going to go to do less woodworking and more sales and bookkeeping and marketing and all these other tangential things. And his argument is the book is really consider whether or not you're an entrepreneur. And if you're not, consider where you would exist in that ecosystem of value creation, and maybe where somebody like that would find a lot of fulfillment is where they get to be the craftsperson in the business that builds and sells furniture. The leap between I'm good at a thing to now I want to create a whole business infrastructure is a pretty big one. Oftentimes, more than people realize. They love baking. They create a bakery. Suddenly they're not baking anymore. They're managing employees. They're running the business, right? And that's because running a business is an entrepreneurial endeavor, right? First and foremost, it doesn't matter how good this chair is if you can't sell the chair.
Right.
And I have selectively chosen not to hire employees for that reason. I want to do the part of my business that I love, right? I don't want to manage employees. I know what that's absolutely. You're speaking to me, TJ.
So I think there's something, if we can tie this back into happiness at work, is recognizing that, each one of us wants a piece of the problem, right? Some of us want to make furniture. Some of us want to sell furniture. Some of us want to make websites to sell furniture. Some of us want to create and lead organizations entrepreneurially, take all that risk and put it all together. And each person, there's no right or wrong to any of it. Each person is going to find fulfillment in tuning their role to their preferences, to their interests. We're all incredibly unique, right, in all of these things. And so leaders are well served to recognize that as well. Like, I can't tell you how many times we've heard from a leader, oh, I just need to hire another one of me. And I can't tell you how far from the truth that is. You don't need another one of you. That would be nothing but problems. What you need is to recognize there's these roles in the business where people are going to find a lot of fulfillment, and then find the right people, those craftspeople, to make the chairs, to sell the chairs, to do all of the pieces of it. And when we do that, we're starting to build the infrastructure that creates happiness at work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm presenting all this very dogmatically, like this is the truth, and that's a little bit of my communicative style. So feel free to push back.
I believe you, TJ. I follow you, TJ.
I don't want to push back, but I want to flip the way we're looking at it. What's the absolute wrong way to cultivate happiness at work? And maybe a good start point, TJ, is in the recruiting perspective. Like, what are the red flags that you see? Or let's not do it that way. Let's do it in, when you're advising your clients and or your candidates, how do you perceive right fit, wrong fit, and are there categories of things people do that are wrong fit and will compromise the capacity for happiness at work?
To put it simply, I look for alignment in the objectives or motives between the company and the candidate, right? Like that's a non-negotiable. If I've got a client who builds incredible structures with a particular architectural style, maybe for a particular client, I need to find a candidate who wants to do that as well, right? We got to start there. And then where I'm pushing back is if a leader has got a core value of like, hey, we show up happy to work every day. It's like, no, that's not a real thing. Every leader is the ceiling on their business. And, a lesson I've learned personally, my own leadership development is when I show up cranky to work, or I'm trying to solve a problem and I'm cranky about the problem, it's really hard for my team to not be cranky. It's infectious. And so that leader is going to dictate a tone in the business. And I'm not a really warm, bubbly, super charismatic, enthusiastic personality. I tend to be fairly serious and sober. And it's not that I can't have fun, but my bent is more towards effectiveness. I get joy from this deep work sense. And I need to recognize, like, sometimes my employees need to pick me up. Like, I need to learn how to, like, lighten the mood. I got to bring some levity, a joke, whatever it is, or bring in other members of the team and encourage that in them, and recognize, like, my responsibility is to create an environment that can allow people to be happy at work, right? Because if I'm expecting everybody to be like me, that's a problem, right? I've got a role to play in the business. And so does everybody else. And I need to provide an ecosystem, if you will, that can facilitate, that pursuit of fulfillment and happiness in their work. Mm-hmm. I mean, if I think about, like, what do I know gives my employees happiness? Mm-hmm. Feeling effective at work is a big one, right? Yeah. Getting a compliment from a client or a candidate. Like we're over, they just give us this compliment and we're over here celebrating about it. Like, all that work that we've been doing has led to them saying, hey, good job. We saw you do this. That was really helpful. Mm-hmm. We're over the moon, right? How can I feed my team more of that?
Mhm. Yeah. That's a good segue. Kelley, talk to us about um, Kelley and I are actually in a book group and we're reading Leaders Eat Last. And one of the things that Simon Sinek talks about in that book is, cortisol and oxytocin and the amphibian brain and how that all plays in. And what you're talking about, TJ, is how you are creating those hormones in your employees. Kelley, can you talk a little bit about the amphibian brain and how the cortisol plays to the flight, fight, freeze thing, and oxytocin is responsible for the empathy? Talk to us about that. That's your wheelhouse.
Well, I can some. I don't have all the chemicals sorted out. Serotonin
That's
is one
okay.
of them. Cortisol, yeah, all the adrenaline is another one. Um, so how this works is that we are biologically wired to our amygdala, or the emotion part of our brain, the emotional brain, if you will, is always on the lookout for sizing up every encounter that we have with another person, or every event that we have or that we experience, to determine whether this is a threat or a reward, or a, negative or a positive interaction. And the tricky part with that is that that's how we are biologically wired, and it worked and served us very, very well back when we had to fight off saber-toothed tigers and work together to, survive. Not that we don't have to somewhat work together now to survive, but those fight or flight reactions aren't always so necessary in the workplace. It's very rarely that an email that triggers us in a negative way is going to cause, us to lose, life and limb if we don't respond the right way. But the amygdala still interprets that event, that snarky email that we've just read, as a threat to our safety, our well-being, and we want to respond in the same way as if it was the saber-toothed tiger long, long ago, fight or flight or freeze. And so the chemicals that are coursing through our bodies that are preparing us to fight or flight are the ones that are also impairing our thinking abilities. So we cannot think as clearly when we're in that negative fight or flight triggered state, because those chemicals are coursing through our body, getting us ready to do something besides think really clearly and critically. Now, when we're interpreting an event as a positive or a reward, we're safe, we don't have to worry about fighting this person or this thing. We can think more broadly, more creatively. In fact, some of our best thinking, strategic thinking, happens when we can free up the part of our brain that can be innovative and can be creative in its problem-solving solutions. Does that help a little bit?
That's great. So let's think about that from an actual work scenario, right? Let's think about TJ walking into his office and he's cranky about that one thing that's bothering him, or that client that didn't, is taking something out on him that he had no control over. And so then TJ, you come in cranky. What happens to your employee? What that hormone that's created, right, causes something in your employee to then now be scared, like they're not comfortable with what's happened, and take us down that rabbit hole, and how that might impact not only your employee, but your employee goes home to their kids and their family, and by the way, they've got to go to their kids play at school that night, right? Can walk me through, either Matt or TJ, walk me through how that plays out.
I'm giving you this one, TJ.
All right. I think those heavy things, those emotional things, are a source of emotional weight. And so, maybe I'm in some sense justified in my crankiness. But showing up to that meeting, expressing and communicating all of that angst lays a burden emotionally on everyone in that meeting. And I don't believe that that's a really, and I'm not saying I'm good at this, by the way. I think this is a battle for every leader every day.
Absolutely.
But the to the degree that I can show up with kindness and empathy and respect and calmness under pressure, joy under pressure, and I can model that for my team, I can free them from that emotional weight as a leader. That's my responsibility to do their best work. But if I'm constantly bringing all that weight and putting all that weight on them, it's pretty hard, I believe, for a leader to reasonably expect that a team is going to do their best work. I don't think that's reasonable. And we do this a lot. Like, leaders will overfunction. There'll be a crisis. They will respond justifiably upset, angry, frustrated, confused, hurt, whatever it is. And they'll just start projecting that all over the company and all over the team. And that's their idea of leadership. And it encourages people to keep their head down, to stay out of the line of fire, to don't take risks, don't engage in the necessary productive conflict that it would take to actually resolve the problem at a system level. And I'm sure Matt has a lot of examples from this on a construction site, because it's, we're all humans, right? I'm talking about recruiting, right? But any other industry is going to deal with this. And to sum it all up, like, leaders need to bear that weight and show up and create ecosystems and environments, emotional dynamics that allow people to do their best work.
Mm-hmm. And it all happens because of that stuff Kelley just explained, right? It's an emotional reaction that we don't have control over. And so it's stopping and thinking and breathing and trying to, what sort of result do I want to occur right now, is the thought process that I think all leaders, all people, right? Even if you're a coworker and you have something happen, like, how you are going to respond is going to affect others. Matt, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, there are work environments that are really high stakes and really high stress. I was a U.S. Army infantry soldier. That was high stakes, high stress work. And I wasn't necessarily looking to my sergeant to be emotionally intelligent, to create a feeling of safety for me in the context of war, and I was thinking too about pro sports, thinking about pro basketball. And, you're out there on the court, you're doing battle, like, you're not, there's not mortal risk, but you are in contest against others with members of the team, where each move is, it's monumental. And, there are environments in professional life that are higher stakes. And me personally, in expressions of my leadership, there are plenty of examples I can give you of bad leadership in those spaces, of kind of keeping that undercurrent of confidence available for the team. And I think probably the biggest learning step that I've taken with it is from my wife, Emily, and her dog walking, dog training business. And it was her coming home one day saying, "Oh my God, I had the worst day." "Why did you have the worst day?" "Well, Daisy was misbehaving and I just didn't have the bandwidth for it. So I was pulling on the leash and I was angry, and then I lost the confidence of all the dogs." Wow. I had reflected back to me the times that I've lost the confidence of my team through being that same frustrated, poor communication leader. And, there were high stakes components to it, but, I'm not saying a complete thing here other than that, wow, it is so complicated. And wow, it is a whole lot to put on a leader to be responsible in the context of war, NBA basketball, building a house, or making a hamburger, right? It's a lot to put on a leader to expect it. And what that brings me to is there's more to creating that space than the individual leader. There is the culture of the organization. And there are the SOPs, the standard procedures, the processes, the systems that create a flow chart of confidence that supports the employee and the leader in feeling safe in the effort they're doing together. And so I think that safety, even in the very unsafe professions of combat arms, safety is a key component to have for both leader and the led to inform that relationship of confidence.
Absolutely. There's so many rabbit holes I want to jump down right now, and we're running out of time.
We always do.
I love our conversations. I think safety is key, Matt, in so many ways, right? And it's not just about safety from the standpoint of physical safety. It is that. But sometimes it's not possible, right? In infantry, it's not a safe space.
Right.
It's just not going to be.
Can we define that though, real quick? I think I can put some color on that because I like the infantry example, right? Because it's like,
go for it.
The bullets are flying. Obviously, that's not safe, but you should be safe going to a leader and saying, "Hey, I need more ammo. Hey, I need these problems solved, right? Because I'm out here solving this problem, and I need to be able to run problems up the chain of command without worrying about somebody getting mad or frustrated." We in my firm, we talk about leadership as a hierarchy, right? Oftentimes it's like you're at the hierarchy, right? The pyramid, and you got like sort of in some sense, I don't know if companies would admit to this, but there's this subtle perception that the higher you are in the hierarchy, the better you are, the more you're worth, the more special you are. But if you turn it into a lower hierarchy and it's like this, and the culture of the business or the team or whatever it is each layer of leadership is there to facilitate and support the success of the layer above them. And their only qualification for being a leader is their skill in facilitating that success, not demanding it, facilitating it. Then it's very easy to see how, problems flow up and down the organization. Things get solved. We're not at each other's throats. We can bring problems and collaborate. And that certain problems only flow one direction, right? I don't flow my frustration to the rest of the team. I solve problems. I take that, I carry that weight, I absorb it, I delegate, I communicate. But whether it's infantry or like the basketball team doesn't need to worry about losing the sponsor, right? They need to focus on playing basketball. They need to focus on drills, free throws, right? Keeping those lines of responsibility and accountability clear for an organization, I think facilitates the type of happiness that we're all talking about here is, hey, leave me alone to let me build chairs. I don't need to worry about those other problems. And your grandfather realizing like, hey, I shouldn't turn this into a business is that's a wise discernment because he realizes that would get in the way of me doing this craft. But it doesn't mean that there can't be a commercial application of that craft. It's just realizing there's a whole ecosystem required for that. And I don't want to do the whole ecosystem. I just want to make the chair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll say one more thing real quick.
Yeah.
We're recruiters for construction. We place a lot of construction management professionals, supers, estimators, PMs, etc. It's really interesting to note what people get joy out of, right? I'm going to generalize here. And there's obviously exceptions to the rule, but superintendents love to see their project come out of the ground. right? Often they came from the field. They've got a real appreciation for the tactility of construction. Project managers don't usually have that same exact appreciation. They have a different appreciation. They love the complexity, the coordination, the communication, the leadership, the OAC meetings, the scheduling, all of those complex details. And if you were to say, hey, PM, you're going to go be a super, you're going to be a PM, they're going to struggle. And there's people that blur those lines effectively, but we should all just realize that there are some innate things, some innate drives, some innate affections within us that orient us towards certain roles, for solving certain levels of the problem, and to not see necessarily as like the hierarchy as something to always be trying to climb. I think sometimes we need to embrace our roles as specialists and try to maximize our value to the market and to an organization as a specialist in that role. I want to make more money, so now I need to be a PM, or now I need to start my own business. Maybe not. Maybe just keep developing your skill set as a superintendent and tying your performance, increasing that performance, and looking for greater compensation for that performance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm a big proponent of find what you love and do it, and don't try to climb the ladder to climb the ladder. You know, it's the age-old challenge of taking a great salesperson and putting them in a sales leadership role, and they fail miserably, right? Because it's a completely different skill set. Yes. Any last thoughts? Because unfortunately, we have to wrap this up. Like I said, there's so many rabbit holes I want to jump down, but we're coming up on an hour, and I want to honor our time.
One thing just popped up for me, and it's that we've been talking for an hour about happiness at work, and only in the last minute did the word compensation come up.
Yeah. Really great point, Matt.
And I'm going to be thinking about that. That I don't have I haven't summed that equation, but I think that it's something that I'm going to be taking a really big look at, because we've been talking about happiness for 1 hour and nobody's talked about compensation.
Well, and I'll just close. My last thought, Kim, for you would be in response to what Matt just said. Money can only motivate to a certain point, and then it becomes not a card on the table any longer. It's how people are treating you at work. It's how fulfilled you are with the work that you're doing. It's so many other things that has to do with how you're being treated in the workplace that really motivate or demotivate you. So how leaders show up really matters.
Absolutely. TJ, any last thoughts?
Comp's a big one. What Kelley just said is right on, but I would hasten to add that leaders shouldn't justify we got a great culture so we can pay less. You'll notice when candidates are negotiating for a job, we see this every single time. They'll say something like, it's not all about money. And what they mean by that is they recognize that success in their work, fulfillment, enjoyment doesn't all revolve around money. And then sometimes you'll see a leader hear that, and then you'll see a little gear click over in their head of oh, that's going to factor into my negotiation strategy. It's not about all the money for them. I'm going to negotiate them down on that. And that's a big mistake, because money isn't everything, but it is a massive proxy for success and respect. And that is everything to having fulfillment in your work. It's seeing the connection between the good work that you're setting out to do, all the stress and the problems that you're absorbing and that you're solving, and then the return on that investment of time and your life. Really, it's your life. You're investing your life into a job. What's my return on that? And if that's not a good return, that's not going to be fulfilling.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. I love every single one of you. I appreciate you. Thank you for being here and giving us your thoughts. I can't wait till we do the next one.